Hi, my name is Alyssa Lewis, and I'm the manager at Belmond, Iceland. I've been there for about 12 years, and I grew up skating. I started when I was 7, and I'm a skating instructor as well, so I feel like I've gotten a lot from ice skating as a child and learned a lot of life skills and life lessons that I really enjoy getting to share with kids who are just embarking on their journey of what will hopefully be a lifelong love affair with the sport in one way or another. Belmond, Iceland is a small community ice rink, and it's actually been in Belmont since 1956, originally under a different name. And it's had the same owners, same company as Belmond, Iceland, as the introduction mentioned, since 1966. And we really like to focus on developing that lifelong love of skating in our customers. As I mentioned in my intro, I started skating when I was 7. After I went to a birthday party at an ice rink, I fell in love with it and begged my mom for classes, and kind of just steamrolled from there. I've spent most of my life participating in figure skating in one way or another. As a child, I did both individual skating in singles and ice dancing, and team skating as on a synchronized skating team. For me, with skating, jumping was probably the hardest thing. Part of the process of learning difficult jumps is being okay with falling a lot, and I had a hard time with that, which is why I really enjoyed ice dancing and participating on the team. I also competed as a child, but I tended to get pretty nervous before it was time to skate. So what I really enjoyed was performing in our ice shows that the rink put on twice a year. I love performing in ice shows, and they let you do that without the extra pressure of being judged. I started apprenticing with my coach when I was 16 as part of earning hours for a scholarship, and I helped with group lessons, and then I would observe my coach's lessons with other students, and eventually started doing short additional lessons on my own with her skaters. While I originally started doing it to work toward the scholarship, I found that I really liked teaching. It was a great experience because it provided me with a summer job when I was home from college, and eventually gave me the opportunity to pay for my master's degree by teaching physical education skating classes at the rink on campus. I really like skating because I think there's something for everyone, and I got so many life lessons out of it. I guess, as I said, I got really nervous before I competed, but it didn't mean I stopped competing. It just meant that I learned how to calm myself down, how to get through doing something that I found really difficult and scary, and develop some poise so that you couldn't really tell that I was that nervous. I also became comfortable speaking in front of large groups of people, or performing in front of large groups of people, which helped me in school and in work when it's time to give a presentation. I think it developed my determination to achieve goals and to set my sights on something that might be hard, that I found really challenging initially, but keep practicing and keep figuring out a way to accomplish that. As I mentioned, I also skated on a synchronized skating team, and doing that, I made a lot of really good friends, some of whom I'm still in touch with, almost 20-something years later. I learned how to work with different personalities, what it meant to be on a team, and that, you don't have to necessarily get along with everybody, but you have to figure out how to work with everyone and make things successful. There are a lot of great benefits that kids get out of ice skating, and just speaking kind of generally, so not to a specific type of skating, I think physically kids develop good balance, flexibility, strength. They develop a really good body awareness and coordination of, it's your entire body that participates when you're skating, so learning how to connect all those pieces together to do what you're trying to accomplish, I think gives you a really good sense of your body just in general. I think kids also learn perseverance, focus, to really pay attention to their lessons, to their classes, and to what their body is doing to try to accomplish what they're attempting. As kids get further into skating, they also then have to develop good time management. Skating, if you really get into being a competitive figure skater or playing on a travel hockey team, it's a lot of time and it's a big commitment. And you have to learn how to prioritize and juggle, skating or hockey practice, schoolwork, if there are other family commitments and outside activities. And, if you want it enough, then you learn how to do that. And that's definitely one of the best things I think that I got out of skating, was figuring out how to juggle all the things that I wanted to do as a kid, and still maintain a really high level of academics, because my parents certainly weren't going to let that slide in favor of doing a sport. I definitely think this is something that turns into a lifelong hobby. We have adults who skate at our rink that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, some of whom started as adults, but some of whom started as kids and have just continued on throughout their life. It's something that they always fall back on and really enjoy. And certainly as you get older, perhaps the intensity of the skating that you do changes. Maybe you're not jumping and doing a lot more of the intense type of skating, but there are still other things like ice dancing that's not nearly as intense on your body, that you can continue to enjoy for years and years and years. Ice skating, I think, is a very popular sport in the United States. Between hockey and figure skating, there are thousands and thousands of kids that participate, and I think there's ice rinks all over the country. Certainly some areas have fewer and some areas have more, and that affects how popular skating is in a given place. But I think with being able to see hockey on TV, and the Olympics and World Championships on television for figure skating, it sort of lights that desire and that interest in kids, and it's something that's fun, and it's not. It is still somewhat unique despite its popularity, which makes it even cooler for the kids that do participate in it. We generally recommend that a child starts learning to skate probably around the age of 4. We do have kids that are younger and start at the age of 3. But obviously the child needs to be able to walk pretty stably on their own before you think about putting them in ice skates. But it's also about, being comfortable in a lesson with a different instructor by themselves, mom and dad not out there, and, how adventurous the child might be. Some 3-year-olds get out there and it's great and they think it's fantastic, and some 5-year-olds get out on the ice and just aren't really sure what they think about it. It's cold and slippery, and they just they're not too sure. So some of it depends on the personality of the child. We also have kids that start much later, and that's not necessarily a hindrance if it's something that the child really wants to do and is willing to put in the time to practice. You can learn skating at any age and still really enjoy it. Though, I think generally learning physical activities, when you learn them as a young child, your body is so much more adaptable when you're younger that, it certainly helps to start a new skill set and a new activity as a younger child than as an older adult. I don't believe that ice skating is going to affect a child's skeletal growth or affect their height. Those things are pretty set in motion. Things like that would certainly be influenced more by, differences. There's nothing really about skating, I think, that would affect a child's growth or their height. No, I really can't think of anything. We try to keep our student-to-teacher ratio for our younger taught classes, so that's ages 6 and under, to 1 instructor for every 8 to 9 students. And then for older classes, one instructor for every 10 to 12. And with the beginner level classes, we really do try to keep it to 10. If we know that a class is moving toward that upper limit or maybe ends up with 1 or 2 above it, then we'll add an assistant to the class. So there's an extra person there to help provide attention for the group. It's interesting. Sometimes it's hard to tell initially which kids are going to get on the ice and really take to it, and which kids might have a harder time. I think kids generally that are more flexible, that you see is particularly coordinated when they get on the ice, that have good balance. It's all a good sign for how successful they'll be in skating, but it isn't necessarily all of that. We've certainly seen kids get on the ice who maybe struggled a bit initially, but they enjoyed it so much that they've become amazing skaters because they're just so driven to do it. But if I had to pick a few, I would definitely say kids that have more flexibility, also ones that have a quick memory. There's a lot of things about skating that involve remembering steps, remembering programs, and hockey, remembering plays. With hockey as well, hand-eye coordination is a good one, obviously keeping control of the puck. For figure skating, there are a couple of test structures. There's 2 different national organizations that organize testing and competitions for ice skating. One is the Ice Skating Institute, and that is a more recreational organization. And the other one is U.S. Figure Skating, which is the national governing body for figure skating. And it's those competitions that are the qualification track for the nationals and worlds and Olympics that you see on TV. And both organizations provide a test structure. Our group lessons follow the test structure from the Ice Skating Institute with some modifications that we've made based on our shorter skating lesson sessions. And so with our group lessons, kids are evaluated at the end of every session as to whether they need to stay in the class that they're in or move on to the next level and pass the test and receive a badge. As they move forward in skating, the testing does become a lot more formalized where there are special test sessions and you have to pass a certain test to qualify to compete at a given level. Okay, that's quite a few questions. Let me try to take it piece by piece here. Choosing figure skating, hockey, or speed skating. So first I'll say, initially, and for the very basics, ice skating is ice skating is ice skating. So those foundational skills of just being able to skate forward, skate backward are pretty much the same regardless of which discipline you're going to decide to participate in eventually. I think the 3 disciplines are very different, so a lot of it is definitely more about what does your child enjoy. Do they really enjoy participating in team sports? They like the fast-paced action, probably more so hockey than. Figure skating is about the jumping and spinning. Most of it is individual skating, although there are certainly team opportunities for figure skating as well. Speed skating is, all about skating faster, skating stronger, being the fastest at what you're doing. It's essentially track, but on the ice. So long distance, short distances. So, a lot of it is talking to your kid and deciding what about skating is it they really enjoy doing. See, would it be very critical to choose the right coach with the right skill sets? Well, certainly once your child has decided that they want to do figure skating or they want to do hockey, then, at a certain point, you want to be getting them in a program that will focus on those skills. However, like I said, the initial learning how to skate up through, for our classes, probably beta 1, beta 2, that's forward crossovers, backward crossovers. That's all the same, whether you're doing it in figure skates or hockey skates. And you need to be able to do all of that for either type of sport. For hockey, private coaching actually isn't as common. There are a few coaches that will do some extra in terms of the skating, particularly if your child is struggling with a particular skill. I think you mostly see private coaching for hockey at the really highly competitive level. Figure skating, it's much more common. And I think initially for figure skating, if your child wants to get into it, it's probably more about finding a coach whose personality and time schedule fits with yours and your child's. Choosing one discipline or the other, and then would it be difficult to switch to a different skill set? There are quite a few stories of figure skaters switching to hockey and hockey players becoming figure skaters. At fairly high levels, there's a national men's competitor currently, his name is Max Aaron, that originally started as a hockey player and I think still plays hockey even though he's a highly competitive figure skater. In the other direction, we actually have a coach on our staff right now who grew up at Belmond, Iceland, figure skating, but as an adult has really gotten into hockey and enjoys it quite a bit, and that's what she does primarily. If your child's goal is to start on hockey, you definitely still want to start with our skating classes. For our program, we want kids to have at least done one session of the pre-alpha level of class before they switch to our hockey classes. Basically, we want them to have a good foundation in skating and to be fairly in control of what they're doing before we put them on the ice in hockey skates with a hockey stick, just mostly for safety reasons, but also to make sure they're going to get enough out of the hockey class. So you definitely would want to start with the skating classes. We focus on sort of the 10 and under age group with hockey, and we do have our youth development hockey program which goes to some mite jamborees at different rinks in the Bay Area. And we do set up sometimes scrimmages just on our own with other. Well, I'll be honest and say that I don't actually ski myself. However, in talking to quite a few people who do ski as well as skate, they're actually pretty complementary. There's a lot of the same sense of using your ski or using your blade in terms of leaning into edges to make curves happen and the way they stop, the knee bend and leg strength necessary to ski. I think, some of the posture is going to be very different, but I don't think to the extent that, you should consider learning one before the other. I think they're pretty complementary sports. Okay, I'm going to actually start at the end and then work my way back up through the questions. Can kids get hurt easily during ice skating? Well, it is a sport and it's physical activity, so it is certainly possible for kids to get hurt. The most common are bumps and bruises from falling on the ice. The skate blades are sharp, so we certainly teach kids, obviously, not to touch the blades. The first couple of classes for beginners, we're teaching them how to fall, particularly keeping their hands up off the ice so they're not down there by the blades. Teaching to fall in a way that's less likely to hurt. But in the end, it is a physical sport, and it is certainly, it happens all the time. The kids fall and bump and hurt things. But that is the most common. Does ice skating have any impact on girls' general health? I think it's like any sport. If you're training responsibly in that the skater, parent, and coach are all working together to make sure that, the skater is fueling themselves healthily, and that they're working hard but not beyond the limits of the skater's body, then no. I think the stories that you sometimes hear about ice skating's impact on girls' health, or gymnastics, they all have kind of the same issues, or where when you really see very intense training without, proper fueling, it is a somewhat body conscious sport in that, our competition dresses for figure skating are very fitted. They're very, so, it is important that everybody, focuses on the skater's health and not on image or body to that extent, but on, nutrition and fueling themselves for a better practice, and not about skinny or fat or healthy, more about health. But just generally speaking, no, ice skating is not going to affect girls' general health. In fact, I think it can be really good for building girls' confidence in themselves, and building their strength as a person. Will ice skating cause injury on the toes? Generally, no. The boots are really strong, and so no, toes are not common injuries at all. You do find, particularly people who have been skating for a long, long time, it is possible that knees and hips, sometimes way down the road, end up developing joint pain. They get used a lot. If you're figure skating, they absorb a lot of impact. But I think, training, skating, and not just, training health in terms of your joints with extra supplements like Pilates, some body weight strength training, it helps to protect those joints. I think also you see that more in really intense competitors who do a ton of jumps every day. You can see it in terms of, if somebody falls and does injure their knee, and that could be hockey or figure skating. Hockey is very quick-paced. It is certainly possible for something to happen in terms of knee joints, and then that can sometimes cause injuries that go on for longer than just the immediate acute injury when it happens. I think group lessons are great to get kids started, and then all the way through what we call the alphabet levels. In our classes, they're labeled pre-alpha, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and those are the levels that are teaching all of the basic skating: forward, backward, turning from forward to backward in a couple different ways, learning their edges. And those are all things that are great whether you're going to be a figure skater or a hockey player. And I would say for most kids, you can stick with group lessons through all of those levels. Now the key to that is not just doing the 30-minute class and that's it. Your child needs to practice just like they need to do their math homework every day and their English homework every day to get better at it. They need to skate more than just the 30 minutes of their class. Where we do sometimes see kids doing private lessons earlier is, there are some skills like forward crossovers or backward crossovers that are in the alpha and beta levels, and sometimes kids really struggle with them, and it can get frustrating. When they've had to take the level a couple different times and they're still not getting it. At that point, it's a great idea to arrange for maybe 2 or 3 private lessons to help your child get past that skill they're stuck on so that they can continue to move through the class levels. I think for figure skating, when they get to our freestyle classes, which is where they're really learning to jump and spin, if your child has made it that far, that probably means they're really into ice skating, and at that point, it's a good idea to invest in some private lessons. As I mentioned before, the private lessons are not nearly as common in terms of hockey, though we do certainly have some, but again, are definitely applicable when you have certain skills that your child is struggling with. A private lesson, even just 2 or 3, can really make a difference in helping your kid accomplish that and not get discouraged and frustrated. It's also good to do private lessons if your child decides they'd really like to participate in some competitions. We do have some competition prep classes that are more group instruction environment and pricing. But if they maybe try the first one with the competition prep class, have a great time and want to do more, then again, that would definitely be the time to arrange for private lessons. As I mentioned a couple questions ago, one of the first things that we teach in a beginner class is how to fall down and get back up. And we'll do it repeatedly in a controlled situation so that the kids see what it feels like to sit on the ice, and they know how to get back up, so that part's not as scary. They don't feel like they'll be stranded if they fall. And then from there, I think it's really about making sure your child gets to spend some time on the ice. Most classes are 30 minutes long, and that's really good in terms of keeping their attention focused on the instructor, but I think it's invaluable to bring them to a public session and just let them go and skate around and get used to the ice. And that's when a lot of times they start figuring out some of the things that they've learned in class that didn't make sense then, but then they get to go out on a public session, and now they, just in messing around and skating and getting used to what the ice feels like, they start to lose some of their fear. Now, if you have a particularly cautious child, if you or another adult close to the child is comfortable on the ice, then I would definitely recommend going to some public sessions with your kid and just going on the ice so they get a chance to skate and be with somebody that makes them feel more comfortable. And they'll eventually see, like, oh, okay, this is not so scary. Now this is just fun, and you want to keep going with it. But just the more exposure they get to the ice, the sooner that they're likely to lose that fear. One of the things that we see when we do our camps is, the kids are at our rink for 4 hours every day, and they're on the ice for at least 2.5 of those hours every day, 5 days in a row. And it can be amazing. We start with a child who's never skated before and was really nervous about getting on the ice in the first place. And they get out there, and between the lessons and then all the free time, just fun games we do on the ice that kind of distracts them from how nervous the ice makes them. It's amazing what they look like on Friday, just because they've spent so much time on the ice. It makes a huge difference in overcoming being nervous about skating. Keeping your feet warm while you're skating, that's always an interesting challenge. So what you want to do is you want to get some socks that are warm but not too thick. Using the thicker socks can actually take up too much space in the skates. So now their feet are being squeezed, so it's almost like their feet are sort of being put to sleep as well as being cold. If you can get some thin socks, like some thin silk socks, or really thin but wool socks that are going to be a little warmer, or even wool tights, that will definitely help. Making sure that the skates are the correct size is also important. If the skates are too small, it's going to make their feet feel cold, like I said, because it's almost cutting off the blood flow a little bit to the toes at that point. With really little kids, particularly the 4-year-old, they're so little that, it's hard for them to skate for a long time and not have their feet get cold, particularly if they're beginners. So maybe they're not moving as quickly and they're not getting their blood flowing. I might suggest maybe if they warm up a little bit before they get on the ice, just do like some quick jumping around the lobby or some jumping jacks, just so their heart rate is up and their blood's already moving a little more before they go on the ice. I think that might help. But again, making sure that their skates are the correct size and that the socks aren't too thick but are a warmer material. I think if your 5-year-old is, relatively a beginner, if you have her practice a little bit after her weekly class and then can maybe even bring her just one other time during the week, even if it's just like a half an hour to an additional hour, that makes a huge difference. Again, as you say, you're not looking for her to be a competitor. You just want her to continue to progress. Just having that second time coming makes a huge difference. So it's not just the once a week. So I'm thinking you're asking at this age, or at what age will the child start to practice proactively? And I'm guessing you mean at what age will the child start to practice on their own? I think it's best to teach your child how to practice on their own as early as possible. A lot of our coaches at the rink give kids notebooks and sort of practice plans to help them structure how to practice when the coach isn't there. And I think that's really important. We see a lot of kids, on the other hand, who will only skate when they have a lesson and don't really learn how to structure their own practice. And I do think that's really important. I think good complementary training to skating in terms of developing posture is activities like dance, so ballet, jazz, modern contemporary dance. I think Pilates is amazing in terms of body awareness and teaching really good posture. So I think those are good things that complement figure skating really well. I think the first thing I would look at here is what size skates she's wearing relative to her foot and her shoe size. Kids who tend to roll onto their inside edges, there's usually one of a couple different issues going on. The skates are too big. The skates may be too wide. The skates aren't laced tight enough. If your daughter's been skating for 3 years, I assume you've got the lacing part sorted. But it could be any one of those three. If she has particularly narrow feet and she's using rental skates, they're made for kind of a medium width foot. So it may be worthwhile to invest in some skates that don't have to be too expensive but are more narrow. And if that's something you're thinking of doing, I'd be happy to, point you to some guidelines for what to look for. The other thing to check is, does she tend to roll to the insides of her feet just naturally? It may be that she needs an arch support in her skate. And then beyond that, if she's taking lessons, this is something where it might be good to do a couple of private lessons where the coach can really focus on getting her to get her ankles straight up and down while she's skating. At this point, it's probably become a pretty strong habit for her, and it's going to take some concentration to break it and to get her ankles straight up and down so that she can find her outside edge as well as her inside edge. This is pretty typical with younger kids particularly. And so, I've found that I look less at the jumps because, yes, as you say, she can do them in both directions, and look more at which way does she spin better. When she goes to turn from forward to backward, which way is her natural inclination, to turn to the left or turn to the right? And that's the one that I would go with, because that's the way she feels more comfortable rotating, and so eventually will build into making her more comfortable when she has to do multi-rotation jumps. So I would look more at the spinning and turning from forward to backward, which way, like if she goes and pushes onto one foot to glide around in a circle, which way does she like to go more naturally, and use that as a guideline for which direction she should. This is a really good question, and some of it certainly depends on what really interests your child, what about skating? But I think at that point, it's good to work through the different test structures that I had mentioned in the answer to a previous question. You know, that will give her the motivation and kind of the guidance as to what skill to work on next. And if it's something that you're looking at in terms of qualifications for a career path, the more of those tests that your child accomplishes as a skater, the more that will help them down the road when they're potentially wanting to teach or work in a rink or, you know, coach or participate in some way that way. So I would look at the ISI test structure, I would look at the US figure skating test structure, and look at working through those test levels. Going along with that, that is probably where you would definitely want to engage a private instructor who can help guide you through that process and kind of help motivate and lead your child along that path if he or she is really enjoying ice skating. So we do actually have 2 levels of our summer camp. We offer 4 weeks of our sort of beginner camp freeze program. And for that one, that takes kids who have little to no skating experience all the way up through kids who've done some of our lessons to roughly the alpha or beta level. And what we do with those kids is during the lesson time of the camp program, we'll kind of pull the more advanced skaters out of their particular groups to a separate lesson and work on, you know, whatever skills they're working on in their skating. And then we have our advanced camp program. We only offer 1 week of that, and that is for kids who are in the gamma level and above. And it's a much more intense week because that one is really more a figure skating introduction. It's geared at showing you like all the different aspects of figure skating, you know, giving the kids a taste of what it means to train quite a bit more. So it's 6 hours a day as opposed to the 4 of our beginner program. And they do off-ice and on-ice training, working on jump spins, footwork, introducing them to some different disciplines. You know, it's a really good intensive week, but that is for the sort of gamma and above levels. We separate the kids into different groups by age, and we do allow when you register, you can put in friend requests as well, although we do say, you know, if there's too much of an age difference in the friend requests, typically that's between like siblings. You know, we try not to get too much of a mix, but, you know, we'll keep like the 4 and 5-year-olds together, 5 and 6-year-olds together. It'll be based on the registrations that we have, but we do separate the kids out into groups. Like with our classes, the younger groups we try to keep to, you know, 8 or 9 kids. The older groups will be between 10 and 12 kids to an instructor, and usually with a helper for each group. Yes, our camp staff are also regular employees at Belmond, Iceland. You know, they do tend to be, of our coaches, sort of the younger coaches, you know, in terms of like high school, college age. We look for ones, obviously, that have experience instructing, but also really have experience in working with young kids so that they'll make the day really fun for them, since a lot of it is more about the fun activities on the ice, but they are also instructors with our program as well. So for our camps, we're currently in our early registration period. So if you sign up right now for any of our camp programs up until I believe it's May 25th, then you get $30 off of the camp fee. And then we're also, for skating lessons, we're getting ready to start another skating session at the end of April. And so the registration for that is actually going to open this week. And we have an early registration period for that as well. If you sign up by April 20th, then you get $20 off of your class fee. In addition to that, for all of you who've participated in this TeeterPal you know, Q&A, if when you're registering for either the class or the Camp Freeze program, in the comment section, if you put in TeeterPal in the comments, then you'll get 2 free admission and skate rental passes added into your account with us. So it's not a pass that you have to have in hand. It'll be in the computer, and you can just come in after you've registered for a public session and use those to skate. So again, if you put TeeterPal in the comment section for either the skating lessons or the camps, you'll get 2 free public admissions and skate rentals. I think, this is like any physical activity, whether it's ice skating or another sport. If you do, a physical activity really intensively for several years, you're going to be eating more because you're using your body more and fueling yourself. So then if you stop and don't, adjust for the fact that you're not doing quite as much physical activity, then it's certainly possible. So it's just being aware that you're changing your physical habits and adjusting what you're eating and how much you're eating accordingly. Our policy is that we'll do a refund in the first week of classes. So, if they try the first week and really don't like it, we will refund after that first week. We don't further into the session. What I might suggest if you aren't sure if your child will like skating is we always offer a free intro class prior to the start of registration for the next series of classes. So we'll have another one before our summer series in May, and we always have it posted up on our website. And it's a completely free class, 30 minutes, just like our skating classes are, and it gives you and your child a chance to see if they like it before you commit to the session. I really enjoyed being here with you and your parent group this morning, and thank you so much for having me. And I hope that you guys will try out ice skating with your kids. I think it's a fantastic sport. Obviously, I've spent my life doing it, and if there's anything else that I can help you with in terms of answering questions, I'm happy to do so. Thank you.